So, what happens when the money you pay your community association just seems to disappear? This isn't just one community story. Nope, it's a universal struggle for financial transparency. Today, we're going to dive into a fascinating case study of how one resident took on an entire system all because he wanted to know where the money was really going. It's such a simple question, isn't it? But getting a straight answer can be, well, incredibly complicated. You pay your fees for maintenance, for security, for those big long-term repairs. But do you actually have a clear, verifiable picture of how every single rupee is spent? For one homeowner in Vasanth Vihar, that simple question kicked off an investigation that would challenge the very foundation of his community's financial governance. And this is where the two sides clash. On one hand, you have the official audit report, stamped with true and fair, the gold standard of financial health. But on the other hand, you have a resident calling that same opinion a dangerous illusion. So how can a financial report be both fair and an illusion at the same time? Well, that's exactly what we're here to figure out. So where does this all start? Well, it begins with the one document that was supposed to provide peace of mind, the annual audit. But instead of giving answers, it just raised a whole lot more questions. And look, the residents' issue wasn't that the math was wrong. It was about what the official numbers were strategically, or maybe conveniently, leaving out. The homeowner made a really crucial distinction here. He basically argued, this isn't a deep dive, it's just a formality audit. Think of it this way. It's like checking that all the boxes on a form are ticked without actually questioning what's in the boxes. For a community that's managing crores of rupees, that kind of surface-level check, he argued, is just dangerously insufficient. So what did he do? He started following the money himself. And this is where that clean, polished surface of the audit report really begins to crack. It's a journey into unexplained transfers, totally opaque investments, and a system that, honestly, seemed designed to confuse anyone trying to get a straight answer. Okay, before we get into the nitty-gritty, let's just set some ground rules. As a homeowner paying into a common fund, you have fundamental financial rights. It's pretty simple, really. You have the right to know exactly where your money comes from and where it's going. You have the right to a clear paper trail for all of it. And most importantly, you have the right to know that money set aside for one thing isn't being secretly used for something else. So that's the big question, right? Were these basic rights being respected? Well, according to the homeowner's deep dive into the documents, the answer was a big, fat no. And the proof? It wasn't buried in some complex scheme. It was hiding in plain sight. Okay, let's look at Exhibit A. Nearly 24 lakh rupees moved from one fund to another. The official explanation in the books? Literally just mechanical entry. That's it. No record of a vote, no invoice, no reason given at all. It's like the money just teleported between accounts and nobody could explain how or why it happened. And it gets even more confusing from there. The community's savings weren't in one or two accounts you could easily track. Nope. They were scattered across more than 40 separate fixed deposit accounts in 3 different banks. And there was no consolidated list for homeowners to see and no clear policy for how these investments were being managed. I mean, how are you supposed to get a clear picture of the community's finances when it's scattered all over the place like that? So when you put all these pieces together, you start to see a real pattern of systemic gaps in the financial reporting. Let's just break it down. Without a cash flow statement, you can't see the real-time financial health. Without narrative explanations for entries, you can't trace where the money actually went. Without independent verification from the banks, you're basically forced to just trust the numbers you're given. And without disclosing related party transactions, any potential conflicts of interest can stay completely hidden in the shadows. But this wasn't just about confusing spreadsheets. When the resident actually tried to get answers about all this, he hit a wall. It turns out the financial mess was being protected by a system of institutional silence. And this is where we get to the real root of the problem. All of the accounting issues, they were just the tip of the iceberg, the visible symptoms. The real disease, according to the documents, was this massive, broken governance structure that had been lurking beneath the surface for years. The context here is absolutely critical. The association was apparently running on bylaws drafted by the builder that were never even legally adopted by the residents. Get this. 15 years later, the builder still controlled common areas. Key state laws were being ignored, and the association was hitting residents with levies that allegedly had no legal basis. This created the perfect storm for accountability to just vanish. And this timeline really paints a picture of that wall of silence. On November 6th, the homeowner sends his super detailed analysis to the leadership. For about a month, crickets. No reply. Then, on the eve of the annual general meeting, an email finally arrives from the treasurer. But it's not a reply, it's a total deflection. A separate email about internal accounting that completely ignores the core legal issues he raised. The homeowner had to formally state for the record that his most serious objections were never even addressed. Okay, so everything we've talked about so far is bad enough, but the homeowner's report saved its most alarming allegations for last, labeling them as critical. This is where the story shifts from potential mismanagement to claims of something much, much more serious. So he had this long list of documented governance failures, right? But 4 of them, he put them in a special category: critical. These weren't just about sloppy process. They were about huge sums of money and the fundamental rights of every single owner in that community. First up, the sinking fund. Now, this is supposed to be a sacred trust. It's money collected from residents specifically for huge long-term repairs, like replacing a roof or an elevator. The allegation is that this fund, worth about 2 crore rupees, was being dipped into for just day-to-day expenses. That is a serious potential breach of fiduciary duty, the legal obligation to act in the residents' best financial interest. And then there's this mysterious payment. At the same time that reports were swirling about the builder illegally selling off common areas that belong to the homeowners, a payment of over 52 lakh rupees suddenly appears in the books from the builder. The label? Simply refund of project money. The homeowners flagged this as highly suspicious, asking the obvious question: was this money connected to those sales? But here's the thing. This resident didn't just point out all the problems. The documents he prepared also laid out a clear, actionable plan to fix the whole system and bring back some accountability. It wasn't just a complaint, it was a roadmap for reform. And the proposed plan was actually pretty straightforward and methodical. First, demand a real forensic audit to trace every single rupee. Second, create a new finance committee led by homeowners to keep an eye on things. Third, publish a transparent, public register of all those scattered fixed deposits. Fourth, enforce a simple rule. Every single fund transfer has to have a written explanation, no exceptions. And finally, if leadership still refuses to act, take it to the next level. Escalate the case to the state registrar for an official inquiry. In the end, all of these spreadsheets, all the legal arguments, and all the financial analyses, it all boils down to this: the determination of one person to put their name on paper and formally demand answers, creating an official record that couldn't just be ignored or swept under the rug. And this final quote just nails it. It perfectly captures the core of the whole dispute. This was never about simple accounting procedures. It was about legality and fiduciary responsibility, that fundamental duty of people in power to act in the best interests of the people they represent. And that's a responsibility, the homeowner argued, that you can't just delegate away or deflect with a last-minute email. So we end up right back where we started, but with a much clearer picture. This case isn't just about one housing society. It's really a lesson in vigilance for all of us. The principles are the same everywhere. Demand clear explanations, insist on transparency, and remember that true and fair should be a guarantee, not an illusion. The ultimate question this leaves us with is, do you really know where your money is going?